Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the 10 Laws podcast with East Forest. I am the Forest of the East. Thank you so much for joining us, for subscribing, and for listening. This week I have a conversation with Lorna Dune, and you might recognize that name if you've been around the East Forest land for a while, because Lorna has crossed paths and pollinated us with her beautiful talents and music for quite some time. She did the string arrangement on Hearts Are One on the Karen album. That was done with Keith Sweaty, who is her partner. And she did like a remix on the Held Kindred album. She did a remix again. I mean, she's done several things, but most recently, it was kind of exciting. We've done two projects. One of them is a sheet music of solo piano work. She's been helping me take music that I've performed and played over the years, these recordings, and turn them into sheet music for the piano, which some of you have asked for, and I haven't had it, and I've kind of felt bad. That's not really one of my skill sets, to transcribe recordings. It's hard, and she's great at it, and she's been killing it, and we're going to put out a book with around 10 or so, maybe more, songs really, really soon. We're just finalizing the printing. But one of the amazing things is she was able to transcribe certain songs that are like Grandmother's Fear or Limitations or Prana, songs that, because I was looping, there's actually multiple pianos going on at once, sometimes like three, and she's culling it down into a solo piano piece. So it's super cool. You can play along to the recordings or just play them on your own on the piano, and I think you're going to dig that. So that'll be in the East Forest store soon. Get on the newsletter if you want to know about that. But what's really exciting is Lorna did some of the string arrangements on the Possible album. And one of the songs, Undying, that I'm particularly proud of and pleased with, she did the string arrangement. And we entered this song for the Grammys this year for the category of Best Contemporary Classical Composition. So it's one of the sort of niche categories, Best Contemporary Classical Composition. But the song Undying specifically, which the 208 ensemble in Boise performed. So, hey, if you happen to know anybody out there who's a voting member in the Grammys, tell them about it. And when they're in there voting on anything, they can find that category and give East Forest a little love for Lorna and myself and the 208. We'd love to give it a shot, because I really believe in that score and that composition overall. I think it's exactly what it says it is. It's a really cool contemporary classical piece. So there it is. And, I'm a voting member. I'll go vote for it. And most people who are voting members in the Grammy, if you're wondering if you have friends like that, it'd be like maybe musicians or people in the industry. Some of us pay our little dues every year, so we're voting members. But they're out there. You never know. Every vote helps, especially in those kind of categories that are more specific like that. But this conversation, if you dig like music stuff, we go deep into all sorts of stuff that I also get asked about a lot, about, solfeggio frequencies and different tunings and instrumentation and some metaphysical ideas as well as physical ideas. So I was just really grateful to have the opportunity. I did this conversation while I was down here in Boulder, Utah, so I'm way down in the middle of nowhere. So there is a little bit of a delay sometimes between a question and a response, but I think your brain will understand what's going on. But this week on Friday, October 22nd, that is when the In album is released. In, a soundtrack for the Psychedelic Practitioner Volume 2. So it's really a follow-up to the Music for Mushrooms album. This is a 2-hour album that will be on all places that you stream music. It is designed to guide a journey, whatever you define as a journey. And it will also be the launch of Journey Space. And we're going to be doing a live stream ceremony, East Forest ceremony, on December 4th. And that'll be on YouTube Live. And anybody can watch the YouTube Live just like before. But with Journey Space, it's live facilitators to guide you through a journey. And I think we have about room for 60 people. So there'll be 3 facilitators, so a 1-to-20 ratio. But if you want to learn more about that, go over to journeyspace.com and you'll see more about that platform that we're launching. That was really born out of the pandemic and doing these virtual ceremonies. it just seemed like maybe we could offer this to y'all in a more sustainable, long-term way. So this is a real experiment, and it's really on the spear tip and the edge of this development of what's happening right now culturally with the psychedelic wave. And we're trying to fill a gap of ceremony and guidance in an accessible way. So see what you think. We'd love to hear your feedback, journeyspace.com. And lastly, if you're looking for a physical piece, physical representation of the In album, because it's 2 hours, it's not going to be on a vinyl, but it is on a high-resolution version on a flash drive. And we updated the flash drive so you'll get a high-res of In, as well as Music for Mushrooms and Spores. You also get a version of each of those that's a continuous track, just one track. If you want one to just hit play on, like, make it super simple for a journey. And it's got my essay in there, my op-ed I did for Flood Magazine that explains some of my thinking and methodology around what makes this music and this journey music unique for its purpose, and sort of the methods behind that, and why I think it's different and more beneficial than just playlists or other methods going on right now, which is also that's sort of the methodology behind that Journey Space platform too. I'm going down to LA in a couple days to play at the Love Serve Remember event at Wisdom, October 24th. It's the 50th anniversary of the Be Here Now book, which, how cool is that? I mean, that's really the book that was the gateway for a lot of us into Ram Dass and probably into our souls and our soul path. And that book definitely was what brought me to Ram Dass. And maybe for some of us here in the 10 Laws podcast land, that's how you and I came together, was through Ram Dass. So thank you, Maharaji. Thank you, Ram Dass. And let's honor that book and that event. If you're in LA, come on out to Wisdom. You can see information about the event at eastforest.org. Hit the tour tab and you'll learn all about it. Okay, that's enough jibber jabber for now. I'd love to get into this conversation that I know you're going to enjoy with the wonderful, magical, and talented Lorna Dune. What up, Lorna Dune? So nice to be podcasting with you as opposed to just not podcasting and talking, working on projects. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here on your podcast. Big fan.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you. Just as a general introduction, Lorna is someone I've known for a while from back in the Portland days. You are partnered up with Keith Sweaty, who we did the Karen album with, who people might be familiar with. And recently, we worked on a book of sheet music, which is super fun. It'll be coming out piano, solo piano, sheet music. And you're a total genius at taking songs that are not solo piano and making them into playable pieces like Prana and Limitations and Grandmother's Fear. So excited for that offering very soon. But we kind of got reconnected because you did some string arrangements, these brilliant string arrangements for the Possible album.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk to you now. Well, the excuse to talk was like we submitted a couple of those songs for Grammy consideration, particularly the song Undying, which we put it in the category of Best Contemporary Classical Score, which is a bit of a niche, but I thought like it actually is perfect for that because it truly is contemporary classical. And I want to ask you, tell me a bit about that process of writing strings for that. I know it just started with me writing some piano and some very simple sort of basic arrangements. And then I really intentionally wanted you to just roll with it because I should say, you also did the string arrangement on Hearts Are One, which is the last song on Karen. And I remember when you were doing that.
I love that track.
Out in the, Keith and I were working on a song and you were out there. I was like, I think you did it in one day. It was really cool.
When you feel it, you feel it.
Yeah. And I remember on the deluxe version, we released a version that was just strings and piano because we were in the studio and I sort of accidentally hit solo on those. I'm like, this sounds really sick. And anyway, I could sit here and talk for a long time.
Was it accidental?
Yeah. But tell us about this. People really responded to that Undying song, and it was one that was really, really special to me.
Have they?
So yeah. And I want to hear like what your process was, like, you know, doing that end of it on your own, and then when we came back together, of course.
Oh. Well, it's been such a journey, first of all, you know, with some of these earlier tracks that we got to work on together. And I feel like it was a natural progression to this album possible. I really appreciate the platform to be able to explore strings. They're such unique instruments. And, you know, growing up as a pianist, I love strings, but I use hammers, not bows. But I've been working within the new classical scenes in New York City and then in Portland for a while, and have been able to work with some wonderful players that have shown me some of the possibilities of the instrument. Heading to Undying, I just come off of the last gig that I had before the pandemic, which was with the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra. In their Soundbox Theater, which was next to their concert hall. And the theme of that evening was creating a modern sanctuary. And the warehouse had 85 speakers embedded in it, which was unbelievable. And I was lucky enough to play with moving sounds around the space, doing ASMR sounds, nature sounds, ambient music, in addition to this wonderful programming, which included one of my favorite composers that really influenced the orchestration of Undying, which is John Luther Adams. I don't know if are you familiar with that composer? He's from Alaska originally.
No.
Oh man,
living.
You got to check out his music. One of the best living composers. He is very influenced by the sounds of nature and translates that into a lot of his writing, especially strings. And you can hear the sort of whispers of the wind through the strings and the rushing rivers. And so I was able to be immersed in this sort of string writing in San Francisco. And then you asked me to do this arrangement. The pandemic was hitting pretty hard. I was in my parents' house, and my father had just contracted COVID. It was a really emotional time. A lot of things to process, and what came out was, you know, this longing and grief and beauty, and trying to connect it all back to being part of nature. So in the string writing, you'll hear in the beginning a lot of extended technique string bow motions, which kind of is supposed to emulate the wind. And I hope that translates at least.
Well, we had only 3 players, and it was a group called the 208 Ensemble in Boise. And so I kind of told you, I was like, look, we have 3 people. We have cello, viola, violin, and we can stack it and record it multiple times, which we did. And we ended up settling on like 3 passes, so it's like 9 players. And
I know I couldn't get enough strings.
Well,
wanted to make an orchestra.
I feel you. But it was actually like quite difficult to record. Not because anything you did. It's just like it has these long tones, but it has those sort of a lot of really high violin things. And Jeff, who's playing the violin, did great. But it's like we ended up like recording some of it as ensemble bits and some of it like individually. And then I remember when I went to mix it, oh my God, I think I had like, you know, essentially after various doublings, like 50 string tracks. And I'm just having to make sense of it and color coding. And it took me 9 hours to get like one of the first mix of that one song.
Sorry. I was feeling the complexities, you know. The wind isn't just one string. It's many of them.
Yeah. No. And it's interesting you say that, though. I'm interested in checking out this composer you mentioned, because it sounds like there's elemental, like nature elements reflected in the music. And the song itself, like, I really wanted to make a piece where the piano was very simplistic and minimal, and in the middle, and sort of did this repeating pattern, and then everything was swimming around that. And this hit the tone and I wanted it to have sort of an emotional upswelling, but like a darkness and a lightness at the same time, you know? It's
exactly.
That undying feel.
Trying to balance that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think it's a really,
back to it.
Really interesting score. And, you know, that's why I thought it was a good one to feature. Yeah.
Yeah. It really was trying to find balance between lightness and darkness, and without, you know, detracting from either side, you know, just being at stillness with that balance.
Yeah. So you and I were both in New York City, and you were pretty deep in the contemporary classical scene, if I remember correctly. And when you left, we met in Portland, actually, of all places. And I remember like you having a sense of longing for like the scene you were in there. And you've made your way now to Wisconsin, and from the outside looking in, I feel like you've really flourished since you've moved there. Like, you know, you've really...
Oh, thanks.
Well, you just seem like you're really doing a lot of cool things and like making cool music and working with cool people. And like, I remember when we were in Portland, I just heard you say a lot, you missed New York. And I'm like, I don't feel like you missed New York right now. And you know, do you feel like you're in a groove?
I feel like I've sort of decentralized from a city location, you know?
Yeah.
Now that I've been working online, I work for a music production company in Brooklyn. I'm still in contact with some amazing artists and collaborators in Portland. I don't know. I'm sure, you know, so many people have transitioned their lives to being online that my process of finding community has kind of changed a bit. I wish I was a little bit more connected with my immediate community, and I'm really excited to start exploring what's here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin that wasn't here 15 years ago when I left for New York. Been playing some noise shows, which has been fun. It seems like that's been a flourishing scene here. Still haven't found the ambient kids though. But yeah, I mean, New York had a really special new classical scene that is always going to be tied to my experience of my 20s and working with some amazing voices like Missy Mazzoli and Tristan Parrish, and just being a part of a movement, you know, being a part of a movement that had been passed down by previous composers, like the Bang on a Can composers who had started this process of really breaking down the walls of the concert hall and totally upending what we think of concert music, you know. That felt really special. It still is.
Well, tell me about this noise scene. Like, what are the things going on in Milwaukee that feel edgy for you? I mean, when you say noise, does that mean non-melodic, or does it mean... Because I went to a noise show once in Portland, by the way, and it was like intentionally trying to like get everyone to run out of the room. It was like, how long can people last? And I was just blown away. I was like, holy cow, this is intense.
You think
tell me about what it's like out there.
Was?
I don't know, but it was like there was just the loudest, like scratchiest, most intense sounds, you know, for a long time.
Yeah. Well, you know, I have my ambient side, which loves drones, and sometimes those drones can be healing, and sometimes they can be healing through stillness, and sometimes they can be healing through more intense timbres or mediums. So at this noise show that I just played, I'll just give you a little taste of like the variety of stuff was there. There's one guy that had a sheet that had pickup mics, DIY pickup mics on, and was processing that. So just, you know, a lot of experiments through medium. There's somebody else who had created their own noise app on an iPad, and then they were creating feedback loops from their iPad through an amplifier. So it's a lot of experimentation, and I think there's a lot of anger and emotion and intensity that can be released, and I found that with my performance as well. Although I was the only kid on the set that had a melody, which I was a little self-conscious about. I'm a sucker for a good melody. But
yeah, you do.
you can have melody and noise, and it's totally fine.
That sounds like life.
Different parts of the rainbow. Yeah, something that's more textural, I guess. Textural, medium-based, experimental. I like those sort of thinkers.
Would you feel that your moniker and identity as the artist Lorna Dune is expanding? And where do you feel like you're at and heading to compared to where you were at before?
That's a good question. I think we're always evolving and changing all the time, whether it's intentional or not. I don't know if it really matters. I'm just on this journey trying to process what I'm learning through my music. And there's an element that hasn't changed. Some of my more sci-fi leaning rhetorics or investigations of, physics of sound or metaphysical properties of sound, like that hasn't changed, although it moved from a more techno leaning expression to more ambient lately. It still kind of all comes from the same place for me. So yeah, I think I am evolving and not at the same time. Does that make sense?
Well, tell me more about like the metaphysical leanings that you feel. There's a thread there, but I mean, you've told me offline that that's a growing interest of yours. And I'm curious, like, more specifically, what interests you? Like, what is that? What are the things musically that are interesting you that you feel are metaphysical?
I mean, music in itself is a very metaphysical thing.
No doubt.
Thinking about the Big Bang and the primordial Om, and thinking of us being made of stardust and being part of this ancient reverberation of the original sound wave. It's very magical. It's very metaphysical, and also in the physical aspect, just thinking about healing properties of sound as well. I've been doing a lot of sound baths and doing binaural beats and exploring that sort of therapy as well, and really trying to put an investigative hat on to explore what is it about these sounds that are healing. We should be able to study these things. I love to experience them, but what is it about 432 hertz that is so pure, that's so healing to the body? These are questions that I love researching and starting to put into my work as well. I'm starting to break away from equal temperament as well, and starting to go into more just intonation and exploring other scale modes, and thinking about ancient Gregorian chant modes and that sort of not necessarily esoteric, just historical properties of sound and how they've developed, and thinking about how polyphony developed, and what is it about collective chants and collective singing that aids in, depersonalization of ego and transcendence. All these questions are just so fascinating to me. And I'm sure you can relate.
Yeah, that's perfect. Now I have a couple of questions. Let's pick these apart piece by piece. Let's start with 432. So, some listeners maybe know what that is and some don't, but I mean, essentially, let's just say there's infinite frequencies in the universe, and we tune most things to the note A being 440, and some people tune it to 432. And some people think that tuning, are you saying like that particular hertz, like actual 432 is a tone you find particularly healing, or you like this idea of tuning everything down? Like tuning instruments down?
It's not so much me. It's been said that 432 is the universal frequency, and I'd like to understand that more. I'm not claiming to know anything. I'm just really into this research mode of what is it about 432 hertz that's so magical. I love seeing patterns of sound in water or other liquids. You can even have what's called a Chladni plate, where you have a metal plate with sand or salt on, and a vibrating source. And at 432 hertz, there's a beautiful, beautiful geometric shape that emerges. And specific frequencies, as you do your sine tone sweep, can actually create these beautiful geometric patterns. And if you compare 440 to 432, it's unbelievable to see the difference in the actual patterns of sound through matter, and to think about, my body is matter. My body is made up of what percentage are we of water? Like, this is the shape that is actually affecting my physical body as I'm experiencing sound. So it just becomes so much more than, my Spotify playlist that I listen to while I'm doing the dishes. This is thinking about direct, impactful, physical, emotional changes through sound.
Well, I think one of the questions I have is, like, let's say, yes, the cymatics, you look at that pattern of that particular tone and it looks more beautiful perhaps than 440. But when you start adding in harmony to it, like lots of notes, and the relationship of those ratios, like a fifth, for instance, and that to me is where the magic would be. So if you think about temperaments, or how those ratios, like how exact they are, shall we say, versus not exact, would be more important in my mind, because any song, more than likely, is not just one tone. And things like the human voice or a string instrument or anything that's fretless, where essentially, like, you're making these micro adjustments with your voice unintentionally, so to speak, where you might be singing in a perfect fifth or not, depending on how you want to sing with other people, like these chants. And regardless of where they're tuned to, it's more about, like, those ratios. What do you think about that?
Totally. Yes. Well, it's both, because you have to have a fundamental frequency before you have your harmonic overtone series. And then throughout the overtone series, that indicates the ratios in which we perceive consonance and dissonance. Going back to those Gregorian church modes, originally, like, minor seconds and sevenths weren't allowed to be sung in churches.
Devil tones.
It's crazy to think about. I know. But it goes back to simple math, really. I mean,
exactly.
So the perfect fifth and the perfect fourth are some of the most simple ratios that you could have from one fundamental frequency. And yeah, the complexity of the human voice is so amazing to think about. And also our hearing too. I was reading about perceived loudness, that within a specific range of human hearing, it doesn't matter if it's slightly quieter, we will perceive that specific frequency range as being louder. Our brains are primed to be able to communicate with one another. And so we actually naturally hear around 3K as louder than other frequencies. Isn't that fascinating?
Wait a minute. You're saying you hear, when you say 3K, you mean like within a spectrum of sounds, something in the 3K range, like 3,000 kilohertz. That's where you're going to pick up the most. That's kind of where speech is too, though.
Exactly. That's exactly it. So we perceive the frequency range where human speech lives as being louder.
Gotcha.
It's fascinating.
That must be where my mother's voice is, right at 3K, because she just cuts through a crowd. And she was a kindergarten teacher, man. You could hear her. Didn't matter how many people were in the room. That's all you'd hear is my mom. But let's go further with this. I love
listening to your mom's voice. When we were doing the piano transcriptions, what was the piece that you had a sample of your mother speaking?
She's on The Simple Things, which is an old song from The Education of the Individual Soul. She's on a song called Pacific Coast Highway. They weren't that amused that I had recorded conversations with them and thrown them on a record. But they quickly got over it.
Oh,
They're like, oh, whatever. You're such a weirdo, always recording people and putting it in songs. But
it's beautiful.
I think it's really beautiful human moment,
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. But just to finish up this conversation on tunings and stuff, because I know I get a lot of questions about this, and so I think it's worthwhile to kind of get into the weeds.
Yeah.
If you think about the piano too, and when the piano was introduced, that's when everyone had to sort of tune around it, and we started getting into like, it's kind of the piano player's fault, because I can't change very easily on a regular piano the tunings of it and so forth. And then ironically, like I used to my older East Forest music, I would tune my Nord keyboard sharp 12 cents to 444, because I also read that was because there was the 432 was far too dramatic. If I tuned down to that, everything sounded just weird. And it was too far to go for the sounds to be stretched, essentially. And if I went up,
Sure.
I also heard that up in that zone, like a lot of older European orchestras were in that zone. And I just read some stuff about that also being an interesting zone for healing properties. But it's really just like getting outside the box, like Jimi Hendrix tuning down or the Beatles changing. It's just like not being in the same square box as everybody else. But as I started working with more other musicians, particularly string players, they hated it when I was like, yeah, we got to tune up. They're like, oh, God, like my instrument sounds terrible when I tune it up to 444. And so I kind of stopped doing it after I started working with other people. But I did it for
that's
years.
why synthesizers are nice.
So you do that a lot?
Working in electronic music is awesome, because you can create your own sonic environment that doesn't have to be limited by physical properties of instruments, and so there is an open playing field for tuning, for texture, timbre explorations. And yeah, I've been exploring 432 a bit. I've been also going to the solfeggio frequencies as well. The theory that each of our chakras has a specific musical frequency. Been interested in that theory. Curious about what other people think about it. Have you explored solfeggio frequencies at all? I
did a long time ago. I got into, that's when I was doing my different tunings, and I got into trying to play with temperaments. If I remember correctly, that sort of what some people think is that came out of chanting, and it's sort of like that era of music, like medieval times. And that's where I started to get to a place where it's like, well, it certainly sounds beautiful, but I couldn't really say like whether that aligns to a particular chakra or not. It was more just like, I have more of a viewpoint, like all music is sound healing, so to speak. And we have this infinite spectrum of tones that I don't think one is better than another. I think to me, what's more interesting is like the ratios that you play with them, like how, and that's why I like to think about adding in musical elements that are essentially inherently imperfect, but can slide into these relationships, like the voice, like a really amazing string section. I mean, that's really what they're doing if they've played together a long time, is they're playing with temperament, naturally.
Yeah, tension release, using the more complex ratios, settling into simple ratios, directly pulling on our heartstrings, creating tension, and settling into some sort of harmony. But I don't want to write off dissonance, because I also, with the love of new music, especially, and noise, I think there's a lot of power in dissonance. But I think, when we're talking about like healing frequencies, you're right. It's a lot about the ratios of notes between each other. Oh my goodness, I was just working on a vocal effect to try to emulate tube and throat singing, which was a really interesting research project.
Cool.
As you're exploring the harmonic series through your own voice and shifting your soft palette to create different harmonics throughout the series, and trying to do that through a vocoder. So the power of the human voice. I'm not used to using my voice in a musical way. I'm used to using my fingers as a composer, synth player. So that's been somewhat of a new process for me. It's a powerful thing, though. It's definitely opening up my heart, my throat, a bit more than I have been before. Maybe that's part of the evolution, is I'm actually singing now.
Yeah, I totally encourage you to keep singing, because it's sort of this fundamental instrument that we all carry around, and it's almost like all musicians, whatever judgment they have around their voice or not, it's like singing should be an element of their expression. All humans, really, but particularly someone like yourself that's already writing music. Like, what does it feel like when you're writing string parts with your fingers to sing them? It creates a natural phrasing too with your own breath, if you've ever tried that.
Totally. No, I think about singing a lot, but I've always just saying in my head. I haven't been actually vocalizing as much, and I didn't realize how much power there was. And so I started to do more of I've been doing this Buddhist practice for the last year with Ethan Nichtern, son of David Nichtern, and trying to get into a ritual of chanting, doing mantras, and I've never done that before in my life. It's been a totally new experience, and it definitely has been helping my anxiety. It's been helping me feel a sense of connection with my broader environment. And yeah, I think that's really important right now, as we're all, so separated in our own digital worlds, that I can feel that sense of connection with others and something outside of myself. Do you practice mantras, and is that part of your ritualistic practice?
Not in a traditional sense. Radha, of course, likes singing actual kirtan and mantra and the Hanuman Chalisa. And for myself, it's more just singing as my own music and rehearsing. Like, I'm usually rehearsing most days on some level or another. And it feels so good to sing and just to create. And even if I don't want to do it, it's like you're saying, after I do it, I feel a lot better. And there's something really special about the vibration in your body, in your head and in your chest. Mm-hmm. And also the regulation of breath that singing does in itself. It kind of, you take these nice breaths, and then you kind of, it's like putting your the air through a funnel coming out of you, and it creates these long exhalations. And as we know from yoga, like, a longer exhalation typically is relaxing. It ignites that parasympathetic system. So it is inherently calming. It's actually a trick in psychedelic circles. If someone's having a hard time, is get them to sing something they know, like anything. It could be Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star.
Yeah.
But even like, how people can sing things even when they've lost their mind through dementia. Sometimes that you play a certain song they know from their past, and they can all of a sudden just start singing it, all the words.
Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, that's what's so fascinating about music, is that we store it in a part of our brain that's directly related to emotion and memory, in our thalamus and part of our limbic system. There's something about music and emotion that is just always intrinsically connected. And yeah, you're right. Hearing a specific sound or a song might bring back a memory, and that's so powerful when you are working with patients that have dementia, or even just, my own memory recall. You forget things, and then you're like, oh wow, that was my favorite song in the summer 2009. Right. And you're right back there, and it just lights up that part of your brain. It's pretty special. What does it all mean?
What was your favorite song in the summer of 2009? Putting you on the spot. I would never remember that. I have no
idea. Let's see. I was going to a lot of Todd P shows and Bushwick. I think
Bushwick was Bushwick.
Before Bushwick was Bushwick, I was probably listening to The Crystal Cat by Dan Deacon. That was probably it.
Nice. So I want to know what it is you're excited about moving forward. Not just perhaps musically what you're working on, but maybe what you're hearing, but also sort of like the trends that we're feeling are emerging. Like, for instance, I'm a little bit biased because of the world I'm in, but it seems like a lot of people are getting into ambient music and more and more interest in music as a healing force. Companies are getting into it. Various artists are kind of exploring it. I mean, some of it's just anecdotal of people I talk to, but even John Hopkins, when we were over in Austin, is sort of just saying how much he's enjoying going this direction with his music. And I'm like, great.
Oh, yeah.
What about yourself? What are you feeling and seeing out there?
Oh, man. I think there's an awakening that's happening, but also a callback from, the so-called first wave of interest in sound healing and thinking about ambient pioneers like Brian Eno and Harold Budd and Laraji. That whole scene really started a wave, and even the concept of like Muzak. I don't think that we'd have sound healing as we have it today if it wasn't for pioneers that really challenged us in our philosophy of how we think of sound. And it's really exciting. I think that also there's an awakening, our awareness of the power of psychedelics, which I think has been affecting the way that people think or approach music as well. And I think we all are in need of community always, and collective healing, especially now. And psychedelics and ambient music is a wonderful path towards that, whether you're making it or enjoying it with others. So I'm pretty pumped about it. We've lost so many ambient pioneers in the last year, so it's so sad. Like John Hassel passed away, Harold Budd, but homage to them, because we're carrying the torch forward and imagining new ways that ambient music can change hearts and minds. And you touched on the app part of things, and like the commercial application and like direct psychotherapy applications. And I think it's amazing that the power of sound and music is being looked at in a more clinical way, so that we can actually put things through the scientific method and have statistics and data to study, that we can prove something that everybody already knew, that music can change hearts and minds. And I just think it's a really powerful time. And I think we're going to be seeing some new interesting finds of experiments through sound. I've been seeing all these weird new contraptions on my Instagram scrolls of like sound beds and vibrational experiences and color and light therapy, which I'm totally into. And just seems like it's really coming into the collective consciousness. It seems to be less stigmatized, and it's wonderful. Let's have more of it. I would love to see, I'm really excited to see what the future is going to hold in terms of how we think of music, vibrations, color, this sort of multi-sensory experience as a powerful healing tool. Do you get into light therapy at all? Is that something that is of interest? It's
of interest. It's a little bit outside my wheelhouse, other than when I'm playing live shows. I'm very interested in how the lights affect the experience, and I know it's a big part of it. But I haven't gotten into like me actually designing how that would all go. I used to travel. I still travel with some little lights that are. There's one I had for so many years. Eventually, I had to retire it. It broke so many times. I taped the entire thing with packaging tapes from all the airplanes that would crush it, and it just kept working. And someone gave it to me like a long time. Someone just handed me this light. I was like, thanks. And the next thing you know, I was like using it at every show. But I agree. I think light is just it's another like one of the elements that is a powerful way to play with what we are as human beings. But I did want to ask you, as you referenced this before, like how has the psychedelic experience informed your music or not?
I feel like I didn't realize how much of psychedelic culture I was influenced by early on, before I even tried psychedelics. I was very drawn to vivid colors and more synesthetic approaches to things, cross senses. But when I started experimenting with psychedelics, I would, I would love to write during mushrooms, and I did an experiment of microdosing for about 1.5 years, which really helped me through. Really helped me through medicine? A lot of my internal stories. What medicine? Is that what you just said?
Yeah, like which medicine were you microdosing?
I was microdosing Golden Teacher, and I would had a very, very small dose 3 times a week for about 1 year when I was in Portland. And I was also hiking a lot in the mountains and exploring the Columbia River Valley and taking samples of nature and then going back to my studio and processing those samples and just thinking about how I am a part of that world, even if I feel separated, with my computer and my microphone and speakers, that I am part of that forest. I am part of that mountain, and to start exploring through electronics, what that might sound like in sort of a reimagined way. I love sci-fi, and so sometimes I have little sci-fi stories that accompany some of my music too. So it'll be exploring what life might be like on another planet, or if time functioned differently in this world, what would it be like? These sort of imagination practices, which I think psychedelics really helped to open up in me. But I had to get through a lot of these internal blockages first, which we all have them. Finding a place of self-love, it's a consistent practice that I need to stay dedicated to. That's the part I keep getting tripped up on in my metta practice is, showing yourself love before showing others love, and that steps of practicing loving kindness. And sometimes I always forget to start with that first self-love step. So yeah, psychedelics really helped me to find a place of self-love and also explore transcendence of self and integration into natural environments.
Have you ever used psychedelics as a method for listening to music, and have you had any particular powerful experiences listening to particular artists or music on psychedelics, or has it more been the other way around? The psychedelics are helping you make music.
It's usually been a very active, like making music, or I'm out in nature just trying to dissolve into being a tree, basically, and just finding enough stillness where I am just observation. I haven't really explored as much with, definitely like going to clubs and my techno days for sure. Those were slightly different substances, but different mindset. But there was still this sort of collective unity that you'd experience too, in moving your body in the same way and feeling that sort of pulsation and, just a sort of like depersonalization, collective consciousness experience when going to shows in particular, so those have been like my most powerful psychedelic experiences of listening.
Yeah. So how are you feeling? You're a very independent musician with so many different skills. Are you finding that you've charted a path for yourself that you're feeling hopeful about? Or how do you feel it is these days to be not just an independent musician, but a woman in music, making music in so many different ways?
Man, I forget that I'm a woman most days, so it doesn't really, it's only sometimes when people respond to me and I'm like, oh, okay, they're seeing me as different. So I think the otherizing is definitely a thing, but I I try not to let it faze me. Definitely dealt with it enough in my life, but I've learned that that's other people's issues, and I'm just gonna keep on being myself. And as to whether I'm feeling hopeful or not. I mean, we work that stuff out in our songs, right? You know, sometimes I don't feel hopeful, and that's where you know, you work it out through your music. But at the end of the day, I think I'm an optimist, but I'm also an existentialist. So can you be an existential optimist?
Of course. Possible? Of course you can. Sure.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm at. And, you know, I'm just trying to enjoy the flow. I've been starting to feed my my visual art side and trying to embrace even written word. And I'm doing this process called The Artist's Way with Julia Cameron. Have you ever done that book?
That is old school. Yeah, that is like the secret of... Yeah, it is. It's the free writing.
It's like the secret.
It is the secret, like, of tapping into your unconscious. Totally.
And thinking about what the creative impulse is and trying not to put it into a box. And yes, I've had a career that's taken me down, you know, music, sonic, sound design, but I can also be so many other things, and so can everybody else, and it's beautiful. There is that abundance there. So I've been starting to, do a little bit more visual work, and I just had a piece put out in a little collection called Medicine for a Nightmare that is paired with visual art and music. So it's like a zine and then an audio compilation that goes along with it. So I'm starting to explore little ideas of multi-sensory concepts. I'm also really into immersive sound. I got to install a quad in this room. I started writing a few quad pieces, and yeah, the environment isn't in stereo, you know? That's just the limitations of our speakers. You know, if we were able to imagine writing music in more of an immersive way, how much more impactful could that be?
Sorry, but a lot of people are into thinking about Atmos, Dolby Atmos, because Apple is integrating that into its system. And I think that's at least 11 speakers. And I've gone pretty deep in the last few weeks into learning about that. And one of the main things I come across is, like, you know, I don't know, 98-9% of people, the way they're going to hear a Dolby Atmos mix is on AirPods, you know, spatially sort of rendered down to two headphones. And I'm not saying that's terrible, but I am interested in doing things in spatial mixes, but I'm just curious how the consumer would end up hearing it. And it's probably going to be like fancier and fancier headphones that synthesize audio into what they're calling 3D to try to emulate it moving around you.
Yeah, totally. And, you know, I think probably the most new technology that can handle that sort of enhanced audio is in the gaming world. Right. There's some, I mean, have you ever tried gaming headphones before compared to, you know, music headphones? It's just completely different in how you perceive space and the way that they use sound design in a lot of video games. It's really fascinating, and it really amplifies the storytelling too.
Wow, I had no idea gaming headphones were that dramatically different. I mean, that's something I got to look into, because I think in the live space, you were talking about that piece you did with 80 plus speakers. I mean, that stuff's really cool and fascinating. You'd have to write a piece for that space, and I think that's really cool. And even if like I've been doing these ceremony concerts, which is essentially 4 speakers in the round, and I could do potentially a kind of quad mix in there, but this is a kind of frontier where I've said for years that I sense in my gut that we'll go from mono to stereo to 3D sound, 360 mixes. I'm just not quite sure technologically how that will look for the consumer, and I'm guessing it'll be headphones, because no one's going to have a treated room, or very few people, with like 11 plus speakers in it, and then you sit in one place. I mean, everyone's so mobile, and the way we experience music and media is on the go. And it'll probably just continue to be that way. Yeah.
You know, Suzanne Ciani, one of the pioneers of quadraphonic sound, has come out with a new file format for quadraphonic pieces that can actually be downloaded from SoundCloud, which is amazing. So there's been a real push for quad. I think that's like a next natural step for studio engineers, music makers. But yeah, I think you're probably right. The innovation's probably going to be in the headphone world.
Well, Apple has put their eggs in the Atmos basket, and they have a lot of power. So it's like they're really encouraging Atmos mixes, which is, there's some technological limitations that make that relatively expensive to do. But it's interesting that that's what they're pushing hard is, for people to deliver Atmos mixes, not just quad. I would be curious to know, like, if you delivered a quad mix, if their system would even give a shit. Or if it would be like, yeah, we can kind of spatialize that. Or they're like, nope, it has to be Atmos or nothing. I don't know. I got to find out.
I'm just starting to learn about it at my work. Just learning about Atmos. So I'm excited. Maybe next time we talk, we can just jam on Atmos ideas. And just at the beginning, it sounds like you're scratching the surface too. It's great. Wonderful.
I've been having a lot of conversations about it with people because I'm exploring it, but there's these really, it's just funny how some people are like really into it and some artists are like, oh, I tried it and I hated it. And some of them are like, I loved it, or here's what I like, here's what I don't like. Here's how you mix in it. Here's the technology you need. Then you have to master it. And there's all sorts of interesting pros and cons, but at the end of the day, it sounds like it's a really cool technology for sound design and movie production. Like we've experienced it where you're in a movie theater and like the sound of a car is moving. But when you come to music, it's a little different because without it being gimmicky, you don't just want to like have certain things moving around all the time. I mean, like, that's just, okay, that's fun and all, but it's like, how many constituent parts do you have to have? And if it's written in the Atmos space, then it would probably work well. But if it was written in a stereo space and you're trying to spatialize it, you're spreading out sounds, which then you get into all these phase issues. And it's hard to do, I think, really well. You have to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I've been experimenting with like imagined environments and thinking about ecosystems and thinking about different levels of sound and height, and then also thinking about we use our echolocation with sound to perceive whether something's a threat or not to us, like the fundamentals of like what is sound communicating to us from an evolutionary perspective. And it's like, am I safe or am I not safe? And and then we get to the really safe sounds like ASMR, really close and comforting mother sounds, really soft, maybe sensual, versus, a large boom. And even like where in your body you feel these things too. Like I did this experiment with my students in Portland where we showed the frequency range of hearing, and we were trying to indicate like where in our body we were feeling things. And in the lower part of the frequency range, we all felt it like down in our intestines in the lower part of our body. And as we get to the higher, we feel it in our sinuses and our head. And that's going back to like the solfeggio correlation of actual frequencies and specific locations within our body and what they're evolutionarily designed to do. It's really fun to think about, and then translating that into a sonic environment. Because, even if you're just doing a G to a C back to a G chord, there's so much that can be communicated through that. And, I think the proximity is really ultimately like safety, not safety, like how close, how far, what sort of space are you sensing that you're in, giving a sense of the reverb and surround is so much more potent than in stereo. The track that is on this new compilation I actually wrote in quad. And It has a lot of imagined creature sounds that coming from an imagined ecosystem, from trees up above and valleys below, and trying to explore that through my spatial mixing.
Well, you're also talking about spaces. And when you feel music, it typically has to be on a system that's producing those bass frequencies for your body to hear. Like if it's coming from headphones, you're not going to have that physical sensation of a bass sound hitting you in the gut and vibrating your whole body. And also, like you talked about, vibrating in the room and how the room, the architecture of the space is, which is how it's been for all of humanity, essentially, is like sound is in a space, whether it's a canyon or a room or a cave, and these are things we don't want to lose, because the quality of that sound and the full spectrum of it, we're designed to experience that. And I think a lot of people miss that when they think about what an artist can create, or any music can be. It can be a full body experience. In essence, it's really what it is, but we truncate it down a lot of times to just a headphone mix, which is emotional and sort of inside our head, which is super cool, but we're missing out on some of those other levels of the experience.
Oh, I know. I went to a show for the first time in a while, and I wanted to go up and hug the subwoofer. I missed it so much. You want those frequencies. You want that power. Oh my goodness. Before I left Portland, I saw one of the most amazing shows. It was put on by Cymaspace, which is an organization to uplift artists who are deaf or hard of hearing. And they did this exhibit show in an art gallery, which was surround subwoofers, like huge stacked subwoofers. And you could hold a balloon that had an LED in it. And so you could feel the vibrations of the bass frequencies. It was a concert only for subs. And then they had sound reactive lights. Unfortunately, somebody did blow their eardrum out. But it was a really powerful experience to think about how we experience these frequencies besides our ears, how we feel them in our bodies. We listen with our whole being.
Amazing. Well, I mean, we've touched on so many different aspects of sound and music, and there's so many more. And I feel like it's just expanding right now in this state of creativity and experimentation and collaboration. And that's one of the things with the pandemic, is it's shown us how we can collaborate remotely. And I'm just grateful that we got to do the work we did, and the work hopefully we'll do in the future. Yeah. And so thank you for continuing to share your amazing gifts with the East Forest world.
It was meant to be. I'm so happy that our paths have been parallel over the last couple of years, and I'm so happy to see everything that's been opening up in your career. I'm just really grateful that we've had these collaborations.
Well, me too. Is there, what's the best way for people to keep track of all things Lorna Dune, or, listen to your music or otherwise?
Oh, and self-promotion is a tricky thing as an artist, but it probably, Instagram or my website would probably be the best place to keep up. I have a lot of unreleased things that I'm going to be releasing in the next year, which I'm very excited about, that are a bit more on the vocal exploration, drone, experimental, not in, Western equal temperament tonality. This next year, so maybe keeping an eye on Bandcamp, as that's the best platform to support artists as well.
Okay. I'll drop some of those links in the show notes. And you do have some excellent music out there too from the past, so I encourage people to find it on Spotify and jam out. And there's, lots of things you've done with us too, including a remix on the Held Kindred album that I think that comes to mind right away. That's one of my favorites, is the remix of the Held song. It's so great.
I love that one. Yeah. That was a fun one.
Yeah, it's such a great vibe. But it's been a joy, getting to dig into some of this stuff. I love nerding out on it and learn more about your own process. So thank you.
Thanks. I'm always down to nerd out about sound and all of its implications.
All right. Well, we'll catch you soon, and thanks again.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you so much, Lorna. And I know that was probably hard with the little delay back and forth, but you were gracious enough to do this now. I wanted to get it out even though I was down here in Utah, but I love seeing you and I love talking to you about all this stuff. So thank you so much. This song that you're going to hear in the background, what you're hearing is Undying. And this is a song that is in that Grammy category for Best Contemporary Classical Score. So this is the string arrangement that Lorna helped create and added so much to in the 208 ensemble playing it. And again, if you know anyone who wants to help us vote for that, thanks. Thanks for letting them know about it. Otherwise, I hope you all have a great week. Maybe I'll see some of you in LA, and I'm looking forward to seeing everybody else on the live stream on December 4th for the inaugural event for Journey Space. You guys keep walking your walk. Don't take any shit, but if you do it with grace.